We are now almost 14 years old. We were one of the first organizations in this area to look at our diverse community and let one group know about another group and then try to bring people together. And to do this, we try to have different programs which would talk about diversity, make people think. And we also recently, I would say 3 years ago, started working with the Sarasota Film Festival to do film festivals about different groups. The more we can get people talking to each other, as we know in this country where we're at, the more important it is. We try to be bring programs that relate to everyone. So for example, we did a program on the Freedom Riders just to talk what happened in the history of the Freedom Riders. It wasn't meant for any particular group, but just more education. And that was a very, very successful program. And that is the reason we have film festivals, to educate about things. I'm preempting maybe a question, Charles, but I do want to say that one of the main reasons, this is our third Native American Film Festival, and one of the main reasons we do that is if you ask anybody in this community to tell you a lot about Native Americans and their culture, very few people will tell you. But, as you know, because you have taught me, as you know, Charles, this area was a major center of Native Americans. Not only the Seminole tribe, a group called the Black Seminole, were enslaved people escaping to the south, escaped with the Seminoles from North Carolina. So there's a lot of that, and we are so happy that we are partnering now with the Seminole tribe and the Sarasota Film Festival to do this film. And it really is a great collaboration because obviously we bring a lot to the table because of our knowledge of very specific areas, whether it be the Black experience or Native Americans. But the film festival, I mean, they're the experts when it comes to films, how to put it on, and everything like that. So it's a great collaboration. People have asked, are you going to go beyond this area, Sarasota, Manatee? And the answer is, for us, no. While we're doing it, there might be when someone else is doing it, we want to stay in this area. It's a growing area, and we want to reach more and more people. So there are certain things we do every year, like the film festival, but we're always looking for something, a handle, something different. Like we are planning next spring to work with the Hispanic community to have a program, not just a program, but a whole seminar. It's not finished, so I can't go into detail. So that's an example of what we want to, and opportunities come up we never thought about. So Dr. Abulesh, who you interviewed, and that I think was our first, came to us by a gentleman in Sarasota, said, I've heard about this man who's written an incredible book with his daughters being killed by the Israelis, and he wrote a book, I Shall Not Hate, to bring the two sides together. I think the most important, we always say make people think. The most important is for people to meet other people of a different, whatever it is, different race, different gender, different culture, and talk and get together. And the more we're in either a auditorium and they're listening or seeing a movie or anything like that, that will make people think. And it's everything we're trying to do.
Well, the planning of it probably goes back 4 years maybe. And so I've been involved with a lot of film festivals in this area. Visions of the Black Experience Film Festival, the Sarasota Film Festival, and this sort of was a byproduct of being involved in those festivals. Probably the most important thing is to remind people in this country of the plight of Native Americans and indigenous people, not only in the United States, but in Canada and in other parts of North America. So we noticed that there was a void in terms of telling their story, and we thought that the best way to tell stories is through film. And so we thought, what better way to remind people of the indigenous population and the particular difficulties that this country has had with the indigenous population than to do it through film, so we decided to have this film festival. I'm on the board of directors of the Boxer Diversity Initiative, and really through the efforts of Dan Boxer, through his parents who established the Boxer Diversity Initiative, the goal is pretty simple, and that is to celebrate and educate people on the value of inclusiveness and diversity. And so the Boxer Diversity Initiative is an integral part, obviously, of the Sarasota Native American Film Festival, the Visions of the Black Experience Film Festival, and also a partner with the Sarasota Film Festival, again, to tell the stories of the value of diversity, the value of inclusion, the value of acceptance through film, which is something that we are all passionate about. Through Manatee Educational Television, I became involved initially on the periphery of films. It went from just being a part of the ambiance of what the Manatee Educational Television crew has done with film festivals to actually working with METV on a documentary. And of course, the seminal documentary for us was Through the Tunnel. And it was that documentary that sort of launched, if you want to say, our career. When I say our career, my career along with other people involved in films. That was the first documentary that we really put a lot of effort in. It went on to play in film festivals across the country. It won an award in Miami. And that film festival told the story, of course, of Lincoln Memorial High School and how they dealt with integration. That was really sort of the hook for me to get me more involved in films, and from that point on through today, I've tried to keep myself involved in film and filmmaking and film festivals. And you know, experience, whether it's indigenous, Native American experience, the African American experience, or experience of other groups of people, we want to tell the stories of all the experiences, the good and bad. Some of the documentaries are uplifting, some of the documentaries are historical, some of the documentaries can be kind of down. But again, they're in a historical context, and it's very important that people get a chance to see this broad cloth of experiences. So the documentaries here, I think, give you a slice of life of what the indigenous nations are going through. It doesn't tell the complete story. It's obviously impossible to do that. But we think by giving a certain slice of films, a certain variety of films, we can try to do the best we can in the limited amount of time we have. The first important thing to know is that most of the films are free. So you can attend these festivals most of the time without having to pay anything. We only ask that you come with an open mind, come with the acceptance that, you know, diversity and inclusion is a good thing, see these films, to talk about these films. We feel the conversations around the films are as important as the films themselves, and to tell other people about your experience, share your experience, and hopefully we've educated you and entertained you. The panel discussion actually talks about a local situation in Manatee County, and that is the Angola Project, which is an archaeological dig that Manatee Educational Television has been involved with in the past. And so Uzi Baram, who is a professor here at New College, discovered a place, or helped discover a place in Manatee County that was called Angola, which is where runaway slaves known as Black Seminoles, actually had a colony. And so we're going to have films talking a little bit about the Black Seminoles, their experience here in Florida. And so we will be able to actually talk to someone who has hands-on, literally hands-on experience with a dig here in Manatee County that tells the story of a little-known part of history, and that is the relationship with runaway slaves and the Seminoles that were indigenous to this population here in Florida.
My name is Kate Delahanty. We're here to see a great film about the Seminole Indians. I'm very interested in all American Indians because I come from South Bend, Indiana, where we have the Pokagon tribe, and I've gone to many powwows and have a brother-in-law who is also an elder there.
Well, Kate roped me into this. Gladly. I'm always interested in the Indians here in Sarasota or in Florida to see where they came from and what their lives were like and what's happening to them now.
I hope to learn every day how to grow within myself and be a better person. I was raised in the 50s and the 60s. That was not a good time in America. I've also am a published author, and I lived in Charleston, and I wrote a book about slavery. So I never want to come off as being racist. I want to come off with being a kind heart, and I think anything that I go out and do, hopefully education can heal all.
I don't want to be isolated from what we have here in the United States or in Florida. It's important to know. And I've always been interested in the history of the Indians, whether they're here in Florida or elsewhere.
I think it's important, especially for someone like myself, a white American, just to go out and learn more. As I said before, education to me is utmost, a kind heart. I am a Christian, but I think the more we know, the more we learn from our past, and we can be better in the future.
If you don't have diversity and you don't respect it, then you isolate yourself from everything. And so I think it's important for us to know and to further our education and everyone else's.
I believe that as we're raising our children, and that includes college age as well, that again, I keep repeating myself, but I feel like education is the most important thing, and to come out of our own comfort levels and understand other generations and other people's lives.
Because otherwise you isolate yourself, you take yourself out of society, and you don't understand. And education about this is extremely important in my estimation.
I would enjoy seeing more art than the art that we're seeing here. But I'm very happy that it's come here and come to Sarasota.
Ditto.
Yeah, so I co-directed a film called Long Line of Ladies. It's a short documentary about a young woman who's about to go through her coming-of-age ceremony, and that's in the Yurok and Keduk communities of Northern California. And basically, the film all happened last year. We were shooting kind of in several different moments throughout the year. And it premiered at Sundance and is the South by Southwest Jury Award winner for short documentary, and is now Oscar qualified because of the awards that we've gotten. So, yeah. It's actually a short documentary, so it's not a narrative film. And so there wasn't necessarily a script, but basically the way that it came about is we got in touch with the family through Facebook, actually, and my co-director was seeking to make another film that was following up her other film called Period End of Sentence. And so it was about like menstruation and positivity of menstruation within a community. And so we came to Ati, who is our subject, and her family, and kind of just got to know them, talked with them over Zoom during the pandemic and that sort of stuff, and just asked if we could start filming. And we're very cautious of the subject matter and not wanting to film a ceremony, and like how could we respectfully place ourselves in a situation of observation, I guess. I think it was probably just redefining the terms of what it means to be shooting a documentary about Native American people. I'm Navajo or Diné from the Southwest, and so I am Native, but at the same time, that doesn't give me a free pass to go into any community and just like try to extract. And so I think with that, and with any film or like branded commercial or whatever that I do, tends to be about other Native people. And so it's about how do you like traverse and move forward and also bring up the people that you are shooting with. And so we gave them a lot of agency in the project, and like asked Pim, the mother, to be a producer on the project, and like really tried to understand like how can we create a story that they are happy about too, because ultimately it's their story in the end of it, and it's not necessarily ours to call or take ownership over. It's very much who they are at essence, and we're just kind of there for the journey. So Ati, the young girl in the movie, she was 13 at the time, but is 14 now. And she was the whole reason why the documentary came about. And she wanted to inspire a young Native woman to get back in touch with their ceremonies or like who they are and their traditions. And so she wanted to create inspiration for that. And I think with that energy of a young 14-year-old girl with the whole entire world in front of her, like I feel like definitely rubbed off on me and then my co-director as well. And it was just so worth it. And it was so worth it to be watching the rough cut by the end and just feeling so proud of the thing that we made. I've been working on quite a bit actually, and all of it's like shorter stuff, a lot of commercial work and branded doc stuff. And so I'm hoping to get back into the narrative space and start writing again and writing the stories that I want to see and putting those together. And so I'm working on a feature right now, but it might be forever until that's made, but fingers crossed, hopefully soon. I don't know if it's playing tonight, but I think it's playing tomorrow. But yeah, I would want them to feel as though they are in a space in which they can learn, but they can't take everything that they're seeing. And so I think we intentionally wanted the audience to feel as though they have to be respectful about consuming culture in a way. And so I want them to feel as though they feel invigorated by what they're seeing, but they also feel like there's an element of respect that they don't have to see everything. I think learning is so key, especially in a space where not everybody, I mean, I've talked with people who don't even know that Native American people exist, which is like insane to me, but it's wild to like be in that space and like understand that somebody could be watching this film for the first time and like not even realize that it's a Native person that still exists, I guess.
My name is Francine Brown, and I've lived in Sarasota for the past 22 years. What brought me here was an opportunity to learn more. I'm a student of learning, and I wanted to learn more about the history of the Indian culture. I followed Dan Boxer's initiative for as long as I can remember. He always comes up with some very interesting, thought-provoking ideas and events. So I knew that whatever he was putting on had to be something I wanted to be a part of. I'm just kind of open to all the experiences. I have a place in Georgia, up in the mountains where the Cherokees were, and so there's a lot of history there. I've attended a number of the seminars that they've had. So I'm just kind of open to what I can hear and see and perhaps help in the future. I would like them to know, like any other minority group here, that the Indians were here first and they were not discovered. So their history is being erased. You can hardly find it in the textbooks. Just like other minority groups, slowly but surely it's eroding. And they were contributors to the society that we know now.
My name is Everett Osceola. I'm the president and founder of Native Real Cinema Fest, which is in South Florida. I came to the Sarasota Native American Film Festival about their first one that they had back in 2020. I liked their lineup, And we just came here to look at things, and then about a couple of months after that, a person named Paul Ratner got a hold of the Athathigi Museum, and the Athathigi Museum, which is our Seminole Museum in Big Cypress, our Big Cypress Reservation, got me in contact with Paul Ratner, and we ended up doing a virtual film fest in 2021. I liked his vision. I liked the lineup that he did with all the short films. He liked my vision, so we kind of worked coincidentally. So that became a successful one. And so then he brought me on the board of Sarasota Native American Film Festival. So here I am for the third one, for the live event, which we haven't had in a while. So I'm very excited that we're doing a live event in an auditorium with people watching movies on the theater. It's cool seeing it at home, but I'm old-fashioned, so I like to see it, sitting in the seat and watching it on the silver screen. It's just growing up, I grew up watching films in the 80s and 90s, and you would see a lot of Native American actors, and some of them I thought were Native Americans growing up on the reservations growing up, but then later on you found out they weren't. One of my favorite actors was Lou Diamond Phillips, which later on I found out wasn't really Native American. But then the one person that blew me away on the screen was Wes Studi. And Wes Studi was in a movie called Heat with Al Pacino. And he was with Al Pacino, and he was with all these great actors. And it kind of showed, it showed Native Americans in a modern light. We weren't wearing buckskins. He wasn't in a teepee. He was wearing a suit. And my favorite part in the movie is he's with Al Pacino, and he's coming out of an elevator, and he's pumping the shotgun, getting ready to go to war. And I thought that was the best scene. And I was the only one in the theater jumping and cheering and everything else. So I think it's important now that it's Native Americans telling our stories, telling our narrative, and I feel like in order to really know who Native Americans are, you need to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So that's why with my film fest, along with this film fest, we encourage Native American directors, producers, actors, writers, and having this, we're going to have representations of over 40 plus nations within this film festival. So I feel it's very important that we hear all their different stories. And we have federally recognized over 560 plus nations. So I feel this is a need that through film, it's a vessel for people to see an inside look of not only Seminole, Miccosukee, Navajo, but all the other different nations that some people haven't even heard of, that I haven't even heard of, that we hear their stories as well. We're just scratching the surface of Native Americans being in film, but we have a whole diversity within itself of Native people. One of them being BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous people of color. Some people haven't even heard that there's Spanish Indigenous people, African Indigenous people, and it's just now we're touching on top of that. So I feel with doing this, it shows people that we have even diversity within the Native nations. So I feel like the different film festivals is really important for people to hear their stories as well. Not only just Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, Spanish Indigenous. So I think these film festivals are a real need. And on top of it, a lot of people see Native Americans as stoic. We're always serious. But then all of a sudden you have movies and TV shows such as Rutherford Falls or Reservation Dogs, and they show the humor of Native people. And we always said that with Native people, we actually have a really great sense of humor, but a lot of people don't know that. I feel the sense of purpose that they should take away from this is that when they see Native American people and these the movies that they're going to see is that we all have struggles, but even with struggles, even with a little rain, you're going to have sunshine. So I feel like when they see these documentaries, I want them to see like we still are fighting for land rights, water rights. We're still out there. We're still at war. Except we're not fighting with bows and arrows. We're fighting with pens and computers and fighting, for what we believe is right. But also with Native American film festivals, it shows that ultimately we're people. We're people just like everybody else. We're not a romantic, we're hunting buffalo all the time. Like, yeah, I like buffalo, but I'll get it from Publix, or something like that. But we're people just like everybody else, and that's how we want to be treated. Right now, I'm producing. I just was in a film recently called Don't Let It In. We just wrapped up on post-production. It's a horror film, which I feel like the indigenous I want to start a new genre, indigenous horror genre, but this one's going to be basically about one of our folklores, and hopefully it might be picked up by, I don't know, hopefully it'll be picked up by Netflix or Hulu, but I hope that would be another genre within itself.
I'm an anthropologist who works on heritage issues. As an archaeologist, I've worked on excavations throughout this region. And there's a lot of ways of communicating our finds and our findings. One of the ways that works really well to engage the public, to reach mass audiences, is through well-made films. And so I'm really pleased to join in and contribute and support these films from the Sarasota Native American Film Festival. Angola was a community of freedom seekers who found a haven of liberty by the Manatee River. They started settling in the late 1770s, and it became a refuge for those Maroons, those self-emancipated people of African heritage who were fighting for their freedom in places like Prospect Bluff on the Apalachicola River, at Suwannee on the Suwannee River. They came into this region, the settlement grew in size, became an important part of international relations, and tragically was destroyed in 1821, just as Florida was transferred from Spain to the United States. But the story of Angola was more than just the story of a place. It was a people seeking their freedom and struggling for freedom. Some of those people, after the destruction of the community, escaped to the British Bahamas, to Andros Island, to Red Bays, and myself and the research team has worked with those descendants. Others escaped inland. They joined with the Seminoles, and they participated in the wars of liberation, trying to protect their homeland. So Angola is an important chapter in the history of freedom for Florida. So the primary source information we have ends up being archaeological. It becomes the conduit to the past. The people of Angola were struggling against slavery, against racism, for their freedom. We do not have primary documents from these people. We only have secondary ones for those who try to negate their identity, their very being. And so the things they left behind is our conduit. And so one of the things I've done with my research team is we've gone and done both small-scale excavations, and then in January 2020, large-scale excavations, thanks to the support of the City of Bradenton and the Florida Division of Historical Resources. Tremendous amount of history comes out of those materials. We've been able to process those over the last couple of years, and there's even more to do. And we're sharing the insights, the process, and what we understand, both working with the descendants and for the larger public. We are on the traditional homelands of the Seminole and Miccosukee people. That's a meaningful statement. We have tremendous challenges in front of us. The people who know this land best are those whose ancestors go back not just dozens of years, not just hundreds of years, not even tens of thousands of years of knowing the land, being committed to it, and as we face our challenges of economic and politics, of climate change, the people we need to look towards are those who have the greatest commitment and the greatest knowledge. And this film festival, I'm hoping, helps really open people's eyes to the richness and vibrancy of today's Native American society and its long history and its potential futures to help us live lives that are productive and our children and grandchildren can live in this land with success.
I want to start this in my own language, which is called Jishipongit. So Giantamo Estongo Jok Hagadega, Giantamo Joho Jifkara, Hiniamatalit, Mado Boxer Initiative, Mado Sarasota Native American Film Fest, and Mado to Native Real Cinema Fest. I wanted to kind of give a little land acknowledgement to the people who've been here before us, such as the Tequestas, Tamicuas, Calusas. However, we do have Calusas still within our language, which is the Miccosukis and the Seminoles. So we speak two languages. One is one is called Jishaponget and one is called Elaponget. So Mado and Shanabashat from the Seminole tribe of Florida, and also Mado and Shanabashat from the Miccosukee Indian tribe of Florida. So again, thank you, Mado, Shanabashat. And here is Mr. Dan Boxer.
And you obviously know that Everett Osceola is the cultural ambassador of the Seminole tribe and the founder of Native Real. And my name is Dan Boxer, and Lytton Boxer and I started Boxer Diversity Initiative a number of years ago. We've been at this auditorium numerous times, and it is such a pleasure to cooperate with Native Real and the Sarasota Film Festival to put this on. I think you'll really enjoy it. But it wouldn't be the same. I have to say a thanks. I have to thank our Josephine Eisenberg, if she's in the audience, raise her hand, because she put this whole thing together. But we have worked, I think, about 7 or 8 years with New College. They have been amazing, and you will hear from Dr. Baram tonight from New College, and I can see a number of New College professors and students here. So it is great pleasure to introduce Dr. Pat Oker to say hello.
Thank you. I'll be very brief, but I did, on behalf of the entire college, I want to offer you a very, very warm welcome to New College. And I've been as many of you know, I am passionate about sharing the wonderful things that our faculty, staff, and students are doing at New College. And when I mentioned this to somebody, they said, when you give remarks, you should give an elevator pitch. I was like, I don't want to give an elevator pitch, because then you'll hear the same thing over and over again. But I did decide to do one thing, is to take 1 minute every time I do remarks. It's my first time I'm doing this. I'm going to keep track and share one thing with you that I love about New College. So the one thing which came up today in a conversation is, I love that I've been a teacher for a very, very long time, and I love the fact that never again in my career is a student going to ask me, Dr. Oker, how do I get my B+ to an A-? Because that is a question that is just the most painful question for any teacher. Those of you who know New College know that we believe in authentic, nuanced ways of evaluating student performance and student learning. And a letter is not nuanced or authentic. It is a letter, and that's not how we work. And so our students don't ask that question of how do I get my grade from a B+ to an A-. What they ask all the time, and I hear their questions, are questions of why is this the way it is, and is this connected to this? They ask questions that bring me an incredible sense of wonder. And as I think about this event tonight, and any time that when I'm going to hear speakers and experience art, I know it's going to be an evening filled with wonder. So welcome to New College. Thank you.
We could not do this if we were not partnering with the Sarasota Film Festival. And we've worked now, I think, on 5 programs together, and it is an honor to bring up Mark Familio, the founder of the Sarasota Film Festival, and Paul Ratner.
Film Festival representative, along with Paul, our managing director, we support film. And I have a strong bias to New College, having gone here. So that's really the reason I'm here. But I did see the short film, which I'm very impressed with, actually, at Sundance. And the one that I seeing sometime during the shows here, right? And we do have an online presentation too that I know Paul has handled. I want to welcome our latest cinephile. I have to do this because we really pay them enough at the film festival. Paul's new daughter, Ezra, son, yeah, sorry, who is our newest cinephile. We love seeing him a few minutes ago. But thank you for being here. Congratulations. It's a great festival that you put together. And as a Sarasota Film Festival representative, I want to thank you for being here. It means a lot to us, it means a lot to the community. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Just want to say a few brief words about the online festival that Mark mentioned. Of course, you're here live in person, but really for a whole week from the 9th to the 15th, we're screening films online as well. In fact, the bulk of our program is online. So there's a number of great short films. There's like, I think, 20-some short films on there, as well as a number of features. So I encourage you to check it out, SarasotaNativeFF.com. It's free, just as it is here, and you can kind of, check it out in comfort. So thank you so much, and thank you for having us. And here's to talk about Native Reel is Everett Osceola.
Okay, I started Native Reel back in 2014. The way I see it is that they were having all of these film festivals in Toronto, San Francisco, California, Albuquerque, and pretty much I'm going to briefly try to talk over this really quickly. I talk with my hands, so please forgive me for that. So I started working with our own Seminole Media Productions. So I was a cameraman. We had a model that was supposed to come up to do a presentation for a commercial that we were supposed to have. She didn't show up. I wrote the script for her to read. They're like, "Can you go in front of the camera?" And I said, "No." So they put me in front of the camera, and I went through the script. We did it in one take. Lo and behold, we had our own Seminole channel. Lo and behold, I didn't know it was going to be on DirecTV, so I went through all these different things. And anyway, but I noticed I started with films, and I mean, I've always been into films, but I grew up on the Hollywood Reservation, and I wasn't really a great kid. So to keep me out of trouble, my mom always made me stay within the fence line. If I went past the fence line, I got my butt whooped. So my only escape was through films, and it opened a whole different world for me. And one of my favorite films growing up was The Wizard of Oz. So I felt when I was in the house, just like in the movie, it was black and white. But when I went out and I saw all these different films, it brought color into my life. And so when I saw that, like, I ended up going into different other films. So anyhow, again, trying to make this short, a person came up to me. They said, we like what you're doing. We like to work with you. I have a friend that's doing a movie, but he doesn't have any money to pay for his movie. Is there any way you can get your tribe to kind of support his movie for advertisement? If they had to do more cuts, to have more money for them to do the cuts. So I went before my tribal council. They said that right now they couldn't take that risk. So I was like, you know what? I'll pay it out of my own pocket. So I put about $20,000 towards this person's movie, and I put $20,000. I was like, oh, by the way, what's the movie? And they said it's called Boy, and it's done by a guy named Taika Waititi. So then after that, he blew up, and then he ended up directing Thor, which is up in the theaters now. So with that, I kind of had a niche, and pretty much I noticed a lot of movies weren't coming down to Florida. It wasn't coming down to South Florida. We were kind of like in limbo. So you had all these great films that were happening, but nobody was seeing them. So another person contacted me on Facebook, and he's like, I have a new film, but is there any way I could show it down there in Seminole country? I'm Seminole myself, but I live in Oklahoma. So okay, I was like, okay, so he ended up having a movie called Barking Water. And I was like, oh, by the way, what's your name? He said, Sterling Hardrow. So He brought his movie down. I showed it. Nobody knew who Sterling Harjo is, but like I said before, we have 3 languages within the Seminole tribe, which is what I told you before, Jishapunge and Ilapunge. And we also have the foreign language, which is English, within our. So he speaks Creek from Oklahoma, but my dream was always to see my language on the silver screen, and he was able to do that. And I was able to see him speak our language, and it was on the screen, and a lot of the tribal members saw that, and they were blown away by that. And then after that, I started Native Real Cinema Fest, and a lot of people came down, such as Sterling Harjo, Taika Waititi, Stephen Paul Judd, and Stephen Paul Judd just finished writing Echo for Disney Plus for the Marvel Universe. So I would say we all kind of work together. So with that, I'm trying to give a platform for everybody, indigenous people throughout the world, South America, New Zealand, even places in Denmark or any other places in Canada. But basically, I'm just showing them their works and their stories, which I was saying before, we're showing, in this film festival, we're showing 40 plus nations within this festival alone. But we also, with that, if you guys don't know, federally recognized, we have over 560 plus nations. So with 560 plus nations, you have 560 different languages, stories, and cultures. So I believe with Film Fests, it gives a window to you people that we do have a diverse culture. Not only do we have Native Americans, indigenous people, we have Afro-Indigenous, we have Spanish Indigenous, and we have BIPOC, which is Black Indigenous People of Color. And now this is just the tip of the iceberg. But I believe if we keep these film festivals going, you'll see not only that we have a rich culture, but we have a beautiful culture and that we're people too. And that's what I feel is the whole point of having these film festivals. That was it. So I'm done with that. So I'm gonna hand it over to this guy. And this is Judge Charles Williams. So
Yeah, don't go far because I'll bring you back up. So first of all, so it's very, very pleasing to see you here. I'll let you adjust for the echo. What we're going to be doing is we're going to show you 3 short films, actually 4 short films. Between each film, we're going to break and we're going to have a panel discussion. Also, we're going to ask that you participate by asking questions. And we're going to do this very informally, so we're not going to be on the chairs. We're going to be seated here. So I'm going to ask Dr. Baram and Everett if they'd come up, because before we show our first film, I want to give them a proper introduction. I'm going to let Everett cool off a little bit, and then I'm going to introduce and give you the background of Dr. Baram. Uzi Baram, to my left, to your right, is the professor of anthropology at New College. Uzi is an anthropologist who teaches a wide range of archaeology and cultural anthropology courses. Professor Baram's research and teaching focuses on race and ethnicity, colonialism, and the intersections of archaeology and heritage. Areas of research include the Eastern Mediterranean and the Florida Gulf Coast. Current research includes the archaeology of an early 19th century freedom-seeking community on the Florida Gulf Coast. Intersections of archaeology, heritage, and anti-racism, and climate change as future-oriented possibilities for Anthropocene landscapes. Trust me, I can read. To my right, to your left, again, is Everett Osceola. He's the cultural ambassador of the Seminole Tribe of Florida. He's a filmmaker, educator, founder of Native Real Cinema Film Festival. Everett has worked for various departments within the Seminole Tribe of Florida, including Seminole Broadcasting and Gaming Casino. He most recently was an educator, presenter, and historian at the Atatiki Seminole Museum. In 2014, Everett was appointed cultural ambassador for the Seminole Tribe of Florida by Chief James E. Billy. In this position, Mr. Osceola helps to protect the integrity of the tribe while sharing the beauty and history of the people. He is recognized internationally as an expert on Seminole tribal culture and has spoken across the United States, in Germany, New Zealand, and China. Mr. Osceola was featured on the National Geographic television show Swamp Men and countless documentaries and short films. He also has served as a technical consultant and producer on many independent films, and his passion for cinema led him to create the Native Real Cinema Festival. So the plan is we're going to step down, we're going to watch a short film. Everett and Uzi and I are going to come back on stage. We're going to ask some questions of you, if you have any. I'll ask some questions of them, discuss what we just saw, and go on to the next film. Our feature film tonight after this will be Modoc Nation, An Untold Story of Survival, which we think is a very inspiring story that you will enjoy. So we are going to roll the first film. Take a seat, come back after that first film and have a discussion. Thank you.
I'm Uzi Baram, professor of anthropology at New College of Florida and director of the New College Archaeology Lab. September is International Underground Railroad Month, and we're here at the New College Public Archaeology Lab to show some of the results of excavations by the Manatee Mineral Spring. They're revealing aspects of daily life for the Maroon community of Angola on the Manatee River. We're here on the lands of the Seminole and Miccosukee people, and we have an obligation to respect and honor their history, their traditions, their lives, and our work on the Maroon community is meant to contribute to revealing more of the facets of the past on this land.
To introduce the film festival, because we don't often think of this area as being such an important archaeological site. So I have a couple of questions, and then if there are a few questions from the audience, we'll take those before we roll into the next film. And I'm going to start with Dr. Baram. For those who are interested, physically, geographically, where is the Angola site?
Thank you, Judge Williams. I appreciate the opportunity.
They can hear you.
You can hear me. I don't need the mic. The area that we were able to excavate was preserved by a group, a historic preservation organization called Reflections of Manatee. They have 3 small house museums in East Bradenton by 14th Street. The park is going to be opened up soon. Supposed to be tomorrow, but they're going to delay that a couple of weeks thanks to the rain. And so there is a park that's the eastern terminus of Riverwalk. But the place to really see the history is at Reflections of Manatee. They have a house museum that has a display on the freedom seekers and African American history in Manatee County. And they have both artifacts and replicas in another house museum from the excavations, including a model of stratigraphy. And their staff is more than happy to tell you all the details of what we've found and what we understand of Angola.
Okay, and there, we hear the term Black Seminole, and I'm going to ask Everett, because some people may look at that as, is that a Seminole Indian who has intermarried with a free or runaway African slave? What does the term Black Seminole mean?
Check 1, 2.
You're good.
I'm just gonna, yeah. Okay, pretty much Black Seminoles, before we used to have 2 separate camps. But mostly the first Seminole Wars were fought over runaway slaves that we harbored at one point. And then in some ways we intermarried, but we also integrated some of their, I don't know how you would say, some of their ways of, with the pounding of the corn or certain things that we eat, because in a way, one of the good examples the Spaniards brought over the hogs. And some of the hogs were uprooting some of the vegetations that we're having, fruits, vegetables. So the best way we could get rid of them was eating them. And so, but there's ways of doing it because, sometimes there's trichinosis, there's certain processes that you have to do. So we learned it from some of the slaves that did have it. And then it is a true story. We do have, growing up, we did eat, certain foods such as chitlins, hog maws, pig's feet, green beans with ham hocks. So we still have that, and a lot of people call it Southern food, soul food, but we also have it within ours, which is Seminole food. But going back to the question, we did intermarry, and some of our great leaders were half black, half Seminole. One of them was Billy Bowlegs, who was a leader of the Third Seminole War. And then I don't want to give too much, but I want to go into it later on after one of the feature films. But one of the greatest strategists during the Seminole War was John Horse. And John Horse, not only that, was a very good instrumental strategist during the Seminole War, along with one of our Seminole warriors, which was Kawakachi, which is Wildcat. So I kind of want to go into that, but we do have a long history, not only with the Seminole Wars, but even predating that into the 1700s.
Going back to you, Dr. Brum, you hear the term Underground Railroad, and you always think of slaves going north. For me and others, when you think Underground Railroad, slaves going south, why didn't they go north? Why did they come south?
Well, it's a big geographic area. And for those who are enslaved in what's now South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, the nearest place was to the south. Of course, Florida, Ponce de Leon named it back in 1513. In 1565, the city of St. Augustine was established. And very quickly, the King of Spain realized that it was going to be hard to defend St. Augustine in Florida against the British. And in 1693, King Charles II of Spain proclaimed that anyone who escaped enslavement in the British colonies, came to St. Augustine, swore loyalty to the crown, and accepted Catholicism, could live in freedom. And it's such a simple point, but it's one I always want to emphasize. No one wanted to be enslaved. And people could, they escaped, even under great stress and strain and danger. And with that proclamation, people came. And they came in large numbers to the extent that the Spanish governor created a settlement of free blacks by St. Augustine just to its north called Fort Muzay, trained to be soldiers, to protect St. Augustine, but more importantly, to protect their own bodies and their futures. And Florida gained a reputation, Spanish La Florida, as a haven from slavery. And so through those generations, people who were enslaved in those southern plantations went south. They came here, and they came in great numbers. By the time we get to the second Spanish period, in the late 1700s, hundreds and hundreds of people of African heritage have been living here in freedom, and even more come down. And that's one of the reasons the United States makes war against Spain and war against Florida, is to fight what Andrew Jackson in particular understood quite correctly was a threat to the slave regime. Because seeing people living successfully and frankly happily in Florida gave lie to the racism that was the framework for enslavement. And so Florida has this long, long tradition that I hope we can remember and honor.
Okay, before we roll into the next film, do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
How much documentation was there by people who destroyed Angola? Was there a deliberate effort to conceal it, or was it very open, or what was going on?
It was a major concern for the United States government. In fact, Andrew Jackson asked permission to attack Tampa Bay. He wrote to this, what was then called the Secretary of War, which now we refer to as Secretary of Defense. And the Secretary of War responded, and we have that letter, no, you are not to go into Florida on that slave raid. But Andrew Jackson had allies who were more than happy to do his bidding. And so that slave raid was not done with the permission of the United States government. And one of the ways we know in that list of names you heard is, to some extent, some of these people were never enslaved. They've been born in freedom in Florida. And it sickens one to say it, but it's part of the history. They were seen as property, and so there were lawsuits against who owned that property. And so we have the lists, and there were arguments about to whom they belonged. In fact, one of those, Jim, belonged to the estate of George Washington. We have some of that detail. So we know it, in terms of documents, from the side of the enslavers. The archaeology gives the view of people's daily lives. The descendants help animate what they know from their ancestors.
Okay, and Everett, before we go into the next film, anything you wish to add?
I did. I totally forgot though. Yeah, one of the things is with a lot of the what you're talking about. With the Red Bay, we actually have a American Indian art celebration in November, and we did have some of the Red Bay people come. And when they were doing. When they did come, they had shown some basketry, and when they did the basketry, some of the elders that we had came and was sitting right next to them, and it was almost kind of like. I don't know how to explain it. Like when you had an old friend in college or school and you hadn't seen them in years, and then when you end up talking, it's like almost time never passed. But they were sitting there. We had some of our elders and some of the people from the Red Bay people were showing basketry, and they're showing some of their stories. And there is a lot of similarity. So there is some accounts in the Red Bay area in the Bahamas, and I kind of wanted to document it, but it was kind of almost they wanted to keep it private.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go into the next film, and then we'll be back up to entertain some questions, and I'll get their opinions and impressions of the next film that you're going to see. Thank you.
It's hard to imagine that Hollywood hasn't jumped all over this. You would think it would be box office gold because it's part Spartacus and part Braveheart and part Amistad and part Glory with a little bit of Dances with Wolves thrown in. A story decades long of oppression and freedom fighting. I don't understand why there hasn't been more attention to John Horse and the Black Seminoles, but hopefully we can correct this. John Horse and the Black Seminoles deserve to be remembered for a number of reasons. They created the largest haven in the U.S. South for runaway slaves. They led the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. They secured the only emancipation of rebellious slaves prior to the U.S. Civil War, and they formed the largest mass exodus of slaves across the United States, moving from the Florida Everglades through Indian Territory, what would become Oklahoma, eventually locating in Mexico, where they secured title to their own land. It's a remarkable story. It's overlooked not just by filmmakers, it's not well known in popular culture, and in fact, it's been overlooked by historians of slavery, if you can believe it. In the early 18th century, two groups in particular fled the colonial South into Spanish Florida, into the Everglades. One of these groups were Seminoles, who were migrating from the various colonies, just trying to avoid white encroachment, basically, trying to move someplace that white colonists weren't. And the other group was runaway slaves, people who were fleeing and trying to create a free life for themselves.
Everett, you had actually sort of gave us a sneak peek at John Horse. What else do you know about him, or what else would you like to share with the audience about this person that, for many of us, this is the first time we're hearing his name?
Check 1, 2. I think it might float the mic. Yes, that was a little sneak peek, and just to give a little insight, I heard about him a long time ago, actually from my cousin. His name is Marlon Tommy, and he's the one that kind of opened my eyes to everything. And I'm actually working on trying to write a script for John Horse and Kawakachi. But there's so much behind it during the Second Seminole War. And it started off with them being, when they were young teenagers in the First Seminole War in Kawakachi, which is Wildcat, and John Horse, they grew up together. They got into mischief together. I believe Osceola, one of the stories is Osceola couldn't really stand them because they were just rambunctious kids, and one of the stories is John Horse actually sold gophers or gopher tortoises to Osceola, and Osceola ended up losing those gopher tortoises, but it was because John Horse trained those gopher tortoises to come back to him. And when Osceola went and said that I lost them, can I buy some more or can I buy another pair? John Horse actually sold him the same pair of gopher tortoises that he did before. So it's stories like that, but as they grew older, they noticed there's a lot more. And in the Seminole Wars, more than 60% of the people who fought us or who fought with us in the wars were the African slaves. So more than 60% of them were people that we did train. There's a lot of stories saying that we did have slaves, but how can you have slaves when you're eating at the same table with them? You're training them you're giving them guns, you're giving them weapons. They're protecting you in your own wars. And with John Horse and Kawakachi, I believe that was shining a light on that. And there's a lot of stories to that because it is, John Horse was a general at one point for the Mexican army. And because of that, during the Second Seminole War, this was in Texas, so Kawakachi came and was asking, can we have some soldiers from the Mexican army? John Horse went to another Mexican general and says that, we need, we need backup, an APB to help us out. The Mexican general says, okay, but if one of my soldiers end up getting killed, that's both your heads. So they brought some of the soldiers to to Florida to fight during the Second Seminole War. And during that time, none of the Mexican soldiers were hurt or harmed or killed, and they brought them safely back to that Mexican general in Texas. And because of that, the Mexican general actually gave both John Horse and Kawakachi a silver saddle. So when they gave him that silver saddle, they were coming back, and it kind of put fear in some of the U.S. cavalry. And then they kind of had some falling outs, just like brothers. Everybody says, "Oh, you're my brother," but sometimes you'll have discrepancies. So that's why John Horse went to Oklahoma and actually had a family out there. Kawakachi went through Texas, and then he went to Mexico. John Horse actually came with him at one point, but we do have Seminole descendants in Mexico to this day. And if you go to Austin, Texas, they actually have a monument commemorating both John Horse and Kawakachi. I could say a lot more, but it would take a lot more time. So
No. Uzi, the connection between runaway slaves fleeing to Mexico, I just became aware of that recently, and I guess they went into Mexico, which recognized their freedom. But was any of this connected to your Angola project? Were there any connections between what we saw in the film and what you did at the Angola site?
Yeah, no, we started thinking about people like John Horse, Abraham, who's another famous Black Seminole from the Second Seminole War, who helped negotiate in Washington, D.C. To try to end that war. My colleague mentioned Billy Bowlegs, who is an important leader by the Third Seminole War. Our understanding for that time period, they might well have been living in Angola. That people like John Horse and Abraham may have spent time there. And when we think about that community, it wasn't just where people were living, but also there was a nexus of information and represented that notion of freedom. And so that we don't have the evidence that they were there, but we try to reconstruct, and part of the archaeological task is try to reconstruct that world. Try to imagine what were things like in the early, 200 years ago, early 1800s. Where would people have been? How did they communicate? What did they know? It seems like, yes, that would have been part of it. They would have known about Prospect Bluff. They would have known about Swanee. They would have known about Angola. Some of them did end up in the Bahamas, some in Mexico, some in Trinidad and Tobago. Right? They went, in fact, one of Abraham's descendants is in Trinidad. Right? So we had that sense that these were not people living. I always often say this when I talk about archaeology. We dig nice square holes in the ground. So people didn't live in square holes. And the communication networks were actually pretty impressive. And we have to add into this the Haitian Revolution and the possibilities of freedom that was radiating out of the Caribbean, other great notions coming out of France and elsewhere, and really thinking about these as fully embodied people, really struggling and making sense of it. And when we think of someone like John Horace, it's hard to imagine he lived a small life.
Right.
He was just too grand of an individual. And so, yes, Angola would have been part of that story. And that spirit carries through him, through Abraham. We'll talk about Polly Parker with the next film, and think about that continuing reproduction of that spirit of freedom.
Okay. And before we roll into our next film, you got time for one question, if anybody from the audience? Yes.
So, Dr. Barone, did you find any evidence of first peoples when you were doing your excavation at Angola?
So we do know from that area by the Manti Mineral Spring that there had been a pre-Columbian mound. It was documented in the 1930s by a local amateur archaeologist. It actually was quite surprising that we did not find any. And we're not sure. The water level has been rising. It's right by the Manti River. And we could only go so deep before the water became impenetrable. Basically, the Angola level was just above that. And so as we were trying to excavate, it was just a wet mess. The water was too much to deal with. But we do know there were Native Americans there before. And probably one of the reasons Angola developed there was, one, the freshwater spring, its real important location on the river, and a large mound, which would have been a great place as a lookout.
Okay, so we're going to roll into our next film, and so we'll be right back after that for some additional questions and comments. Thank you.
It's going to be a hell of a film. It's going to be cool.
The tribe has a major part of being part of Egmont Key and the restoration of it due to its history with the Seminole tribe of Florida. In Seminole war times, during the Indian Removal Act, the soldiers were taking us to Fort Myers, and they would hold us at Fort Myers and wait for another cavalry to come by and pick us up and take us off to Oklahoma. But we knew the land so well, and we knew what to use, what resources to use to help us escape, that they never were able to hold us there. So to hold us at a place where they could keep us and not have to worry about us being able to escape, they decided to take us to an island off the coast of Tampa. And the island happens to be today known as Egmont Key. And they would take us here and hold us here until a ship called the Great Cloud would come from New Orleans, pick us up, and take us through a channel that goes all the way to Arkansas. and from there take us to Oklahoma. Now it was there were a few leaders that actually got stuck and trapped here on the island as well. And one of the stories I'm told is that there was a leader by the name of Tiger Tail, and he felt so strongly that he did not want to leave the island that he would rather kill himself before he was ever taken off and taken to Oklahoma. So he actually crushed up glass, and with his daughter standing next to his side, telling him not to do it, he drank water with the broken glass and killed himself.
Okay, so how many of you know of Egmont Key? Pretty much, how many of you knew that history of Egmont Key? Okay. I've been a Floridian for more years than I can count now, and I've been to Egmont Key, and it wasn't until I screened that short film that I knew that history. So it's amazing the things that you don't know about. Everett, you want to add to or comment on what we just saw?
Yeah, I just basically wanted to say a little bit of treat for you guys. That's actually my great-great-great-great-grandmother. So if it wasn't for her, pretty much my family would be in Oklahoma right now. So because of her, that's why my family is still here. And some of the people that were in there, that's my aunt, Nancy Willie, Bobby Lou Bowers, and also one of my other one of my other cousins there in Tommy. So basically we have the Bowers, Tommies, and my other cousin back here, who's a painter, Wilson Bowers, that's also his great-great-great-grandmother as well. So we're descendants from that, so that's why that's very important to us. But to touch on that and exactly what Quentin Cypress was saying in the video, it's very important that we know our history, because they always say the spoils go to the victory, or the person who wins the war can write the history. But I feel like with Native people, we were never given that luxury. We're never given that. And I feel it's very important that people know about Egmont Key. And the reason being, and the travesty of it, is because if you don't know where you came from, you're doomed to repeat it. So I feel it's very important that we need to kind of preserve that. And, you know, Mother Nature is kind of taking its toll. But even with this video and making it aware about the history of it, I believe people can know the history of that, and how, I wouldn't say significant to Seminole people, but how, you know, I don't want to show, I mean, I do want you guys to know what the Seminole people and the Native people have been through, but I want people to know that we're still here, and we're still surviving, and we still speak our language, and we still have our culture. So even though we had things like that, me and a handful of people who are here in the audience are still here as Seminole people.
And Uzi, I'm going to assume, because you are an educator at an esteemed institution like New College, you knew this story, or you knew of this story. But it goes to the broader question of why most of us don't know this story.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, the term is, you know, hidden in plain sight. It's not as if someone's hiding any of this. It is available, but we have to recognize that centuries of Spanish colonialism, then the aggressive wars, the Seminole Wars, what divided up by U.S. historians as 3 wars, but really a century-long war that pushed people down south, sent others into exile into Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, was purposely trying to erase that history. And then as Florida developed in the 20th century, including Bertha Palmer and the Ringlings who came to Sarasota and started developing, well, they saw the mounds, and this is the question about that mounds by the Manti Mineral Spring, as a source for shell for roads that made the Tamiami Trail. So untold numbers of mounds and middens were destroyed purposefully, and then others because people wanted to build nice houses on the coast. And so we lost a tremendous amount of history, tremendous sense of the extent of human activity here. And now we face even a greater danger as the water levels are rising. Egmont Key is, as the film points out, disappearing. Some of it is rising sea level, some of it is the channels that allows bigger ships to go to the port of Tampa. The currents are wiping it away. We're losing more and more areas. We have representative from Historic Spanish Point in the audience. They have tremendous amount of important archaeological evidence. They curate really well, but the waves are lapping at those sites. And there's a tremendous amount we'll lose if we don't put in the effort now to try to remember it. It's as if it may never have happened. And so we have a tremendous obligation to future generations to actually enlighten ourselves on the history that's knowable, document it, and make sure it can be conveyed to future generations so we don't forget what was here and what will be here.
And from a local perspective, anecdotally, those of you who go down Mound Street, it's named Mound Street because of that and the desecration of that. We have time for one question before we go on. If they're real short, I'll try to get to two since this was a short film. I'll start with you, ma'am.
Is there any preservation effort afoot to take it away, to control the water around it like they did in Egypt? They actually excavated and put it on the land.
Do you want me to answer or you want to answer it?
You can go and then I'll get
So
it.
one of the things that the Heritage and Environmental Office of the Seminole Tribe of Florida has done, HERO, is partner with the University of South Florida, Tampa, and their archaeologists have been 3D scanning the entire island.
Yes.
And that will provide digital reconstruction of the place. It's a tremendous effort. They're doing it, the USF professors are doing it in partnership with tribal members and with HERO. And it is an answer because we can't stop the waters.
Okay.
The expense would be tremendous and probably wouldn't work.
Yes, quick question. I'll get to you too.
I grew up in New York City, the public schools, and there was one page on the Seminole Wars. That means half a page was the picture, and so 2 paragraphs on the Seminole Wars, but I do remember being taught it, and if it's not taught in the schools, you don't learn it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I was going to address. I think there is an entire unit taught in the elementary schools that the Florida State curriculum demands. Now, I don't know what level it is. I don't know what's wrong or up. I taught music in an elementary school. I wasn't a classroom teacher, so I don't know exactly what was covered, but I think they did like 6 weeks or something like
Yeah.
that, or 8 weeks.
And that's not surprising. Yes, ma'am.
And my comment is just that I'm a child of the 50s, and what we watched John Wayne.
Yeah.
That's why we never knew anything about the future.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a quick question?
You guys kind of answered. I was going to say, is the state open to any renourishment projects to try to maintain the island?
Right now, as Uzi was saying, is that along with our Athathigi Museum, we have Athathigi, HERO, and it's called TIPO, which is the Tribal Historical Preservation Office, which has the GIS system, which is the mapping part. And they're always looking for people for support, volunteers, people who, if they want to go out there to actually see what they do and keep them updated, or if you want to just be a participant in what they go and do and some of the stuff to try and help the island the way it is right now, you're more than welcome to, but it's, we'll probably put it up on the web system because Athathigi, it is a hard word to spell. Not for me, but, you know.
Okay, we have to do one, let me, if it's real quick.
Yeah, it was just, I just wanted to make a comment. It was about him talking about the black indigenous people. Okay, there were quite a few, not just in the Seminoles, but we also had the Black Creeks in Georgia, which my grandfather was one. And my mother was Cherokee. So you have them just about all over the southern states.
Yeah.
And they was marched out through the Trail of Tears.
Sure. Yes.
Sure. Some of them wind up staying in Georgia, hiding in the woods, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to roll one last short film. Then I think we'll answer some questions about that, and then our feature film will come. It's I think we're right on time for that. So we're going to watch this last short film, and we'll be right back.
From the beginning of time, our people, the Seminole, have lived as free people. Before the first Europeans set foot on North American soil, we had our own government, our own justice system, our own economy, healthcare, education, domestic relations, and the right to defend our people against foreign aggression. We are the source of our sovereignty.
I am tribal sovereignty.
Tribal sovereignty works far beyond solely preserving the existence of governmental authority, far beyond the sovereignty of Western ideology. Instead, tribal sovereignty, as created in the context of indigenous ideologies, works to directly preserve that which the government is responsible for, our people. Tribal sovereignty is the inherent role Seminoles have for the survival of our lands, ancestors, culture, and bodies. It is our role for the continued existence of life. Therefore, tribal sovereignty is the natural authority and responsibility of the tribe to freely govern itself for the preservation of our people.
I am tribal sovereignty.
Understanding the very nature of tribal sovereignty is essential in being able to assert and defend it. Tribal sovereignty is an embodiment of our role as stewards, created from our relationships and responsibilities to our bodies, ancestors, and land. Sovereignty is not a privilege or exception we are given from Western concepts of political identity and institution. Tribal sovereignty is our lifeblood, blood passed down from generations of our Seminole people.
I am tribal sovereignty.
Sovereignty is something born from our natural relations, something we are of, something that cannot be taken away. Sovereignty is inherent, and as Native people, we are obligated and responsible for its protection. Because of this, it is important for us to analyze how our tribal sovereignty is enacted in different contexts, and to ever develop strategies for asserting tribal sovereignty.
I am tribal sovereignty.
Short film, but tell us what motivated that film and why that clip was so important, why it was so important what we saw.
Okay, so a lot of people know about our history, Seminole Wars, alligator wrestling, Andrew Jackson, but really people don't know about how we are today. And everybody hears about the casinos and everybody hears about Hard Rock. However, that all started with our governmental systems becoming a federally recognized tribe. We became a federally recognized tribe back in 1957. We just celebrated our 65th anniversary as the Seminole Tribe of Florida. But before then, we were put on a termination list. And termination list back in, the early 1900s, it wasn't the Seminole Wars of, they were gonna, we were gonna go at war again. They were gonna put us on a termination list as basically we weren't gonna be regarded as US citizens. We weren't even known as US citizens until 1962. And we weren't even given the freedom to do our own ceremonials, speak our own language until 1983. So with tribal sovereignty, and when we had that, the Seminole Tribe of Florida were the first ones to kind of use that as a strength to build schools, to have it on reservations, to fight against land rights, water rights. I don't want to repeat what just happened in the video, but that's what the importance of tribal sovereignty is. However, when we did start having the casinos, it started with high stakes bingos. That was our way to be self-reliant. We didn't have to rely on the U.S. government. The only reason we had any kind of aid from the U.S. government is when we had, food, such as cereal, milk, commodity cheese, which in a way I kind of miss in a way. But we would have foods like that. A lot of people think, and it's been out there, and I'm sure you guys hear it, that you guys get a free check from the government. No, we didn't. The checks we do, or however, we get it from the casinos, but we don't get it just from the casinos. We also get it from cattle. We also had our own produce. We even had ropes. We even had juices that were being sold in Publix. So we have all these diverse ways of making income. But going back to that, we were put on a termination list back in 1930s. The reason why we were put on this, because during that time, that's when the United States was going into World War II. So the presidents were looking at everything to see what they can terminate, and the first thing that they wanted to terminate were Native American reservations. And if they got rid of that, they got more money to put efforts towards the war. However, some of the leaders during that time wanted a little bit more time to teach the younger tribal members or the younger Seminoles to actually learn and then take over and be leaders to do that for the tribe. So they asked the government, and they had people like Betty Mae Jumper, Laura Mae Billy. They went in front of Congress and they asked for that. So we got about 25 years, and they taught the youth. Later on, that became James Billy, Max Osceola, Mondo Tiger, Bill Osceola, and they ended up putting the tribe to where it's at. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that the Seminole Tribe of Florida, we were the first ones to start Indian gaming. And this is what all the other different tribes have now today. So we were the first ones to start Indian gaming, and we're raising the bar even more. However, just like in the video, because of that, when we do things in a certain aspect, our sovereignty is always a constant target. Now, one of the things is, and which a lot of people don't know, is that we're always fighting state and federal. Just like with the Seminole Wars, we're not doing bows and arrows anymore. We're fighting with our pens and computers right now. And one of the big things that was a big opener is when Disney World was considered a sovereign entity, because they had their own fire station, police, they had their own currency. When you get those little magic bands, they were underneath a sovereign state of law. And because that was taken away, now that opens a target not only for the Seminole people, but for other different native lands. So we're still at a constant war, but not only just about our sovereignty and our rights, but we're also fighting with land rights, water rights. We're fighting with people fracking and drilling oil within our Everglades, which is right in our backyard. So we're still at war, and it's a constant thing going on. And I believe when they hear sovereignty, a lot of people don't know what it is, but that's what it is. It's basically not for us. People just think we're just being free, whatever, but no, we're not only protecting us, but we're protecting you guys as well, because we drink the same water, we walk the same land. So that's what we're always trying to do. We're trying to protect the land that we all live on. So.
Okay. So briefly, Uzi, anything you want to comment after seeing that?
Well, I think I'll just emphasize as strongly as possible the need to have some humility and to recognize both that long, long heritage of sovereignty that comes from the Seminoles, but also this is a constitutional issue. It's not, when I'm asked, can you bring someone, a Native American, to speak? Can you do something? It's not, I don't do that. The Seminole Tribe of Florida, since 1957, is recognized as a sovereign nation by the United States of America and the state of Florida. They work with the federal government. I can talk to individuals, of course, but if you want to interact with the tribe, you do it through the tribal leadership at the appropriate levels. It is something that is part of the Constitution, but as we all know, and we should be constantly concerned about, is the state of our democracy. And that we need to protect that rule of law, that sense of how things are going. When my colleague says that war, he's, I think, being too quiet about it. What's known as Everglades restoration means that the Seminole Tribe of Florida has to have fights with each project done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the way water goes. Because sometimes the water is going to go over burial grounds, over sacred places, over camps that people used in their childhood, and they can't fight it just on the federal level. They do it with every project, and it's hundreds of projects, and there's only so many members of the staff at HERO, at the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. We here have a responsibility to ensure our elected officials respect the Constitution, respect the sovereignty of the Seminole Tribe of Florida, of the Miccosukee, and of course of others around the country, the 560 recognized nation. It's our responsibility to do that. And as Everett said all too well, and as an anthropologist, I can only underscore, what we know is when you look at the smallest groups of people, several thousand, see what's happening to them, you get really good lessons what's going to happen to the rest of us if you don't pay attention. So yes, in many ways, we here in Florida are incredibly lucky that the Seminole Tribe of Florida is trying to protect our waters, our land, and our future. We should be helping them more.
Okay. And on and on that note, I want to again acknowledge Everett Osceola, Dr. Baram, thank them for being here. I want to give you an idea that we're going to start our feature for tonight, and it's just so that you know, I think it's about an hour long. It's not overly long. I know that you've been sitting there for a while, so in a few minutes we'll start that. That'll give you an opportunity to use the facilities and come back. The name of the film is Modoc Nation, The Untold Story of Survival. And again, it is a truly inspiring and tragic story, but inspiring also. So let's have a round of applause for Dr. Baram and Everett Osceola. Thank you. Good job. Good job. Great job.
Thank you so much.